Hi, my name is Winslet, and welcome to my video discussing the fourth dev diary for Age of Wonders 4. This one is covering realms in Pantheon. I just got done reading through it the first time, and I have to say that there's a lot of information in here that I find less interesting than previous dev diaries, and a few things in here that I find really interesting. Specifically, I really like that they are talking about the Empire mode in Planetfall and how they were using that to play around with different things that you can trade in and out of planets to make them a little bit more interesting. I never really enjoyed the way it was implemented in Planetfall, so I'm glad that they actually got some feedback, and I'm interested to see how they've actually tweaked it to make it more fun. We'll talk about some of what it looks like they've been playing around with later in the Dev Diary video because we got some other things to talk about first. Like when you beat a planet, this is when you get to decide if you like the leader enough to have them appear in future games or not. It seems like if you let them join the Pantheon, they can either join you or oppose you as like, an ally or an enemy on future planets. That's the way I choose to interpret this line about how they can join you in future conquests or oppose you. Like, I just think that means they'll appear on the planet and you can choose to ally them or conquer them. Um, Next, we have this image with all these nice realms in it. If we click on it, you can see a little bit more information about this. I really like that there's tiers on these things. That it's kind of like tier 1 units, tier 2 units, tier 3 units, tier 4 units as you move through them, because I think that's going to make it a lot more replayable, and it opens up the possibility to go past tier 5 and maybe do tier 6 in a DLC or something like that. As well as giving veteran players something interesting to do first past their first single player experience. It just isn't the same thing over and over again. We've got hive cities. That sounds pretty interesting. The silenced realm. This one specifically has scarred divide, rampant undeath, curse of undeath, no respite. And I don't know which each of those mean, but I feel like scarred divide means you won't be able to travel across the map as easily. There may be like a big like a hole in the ground, kind of like the lava that they mentioned later in the dev diary. There's one thing in here about how it's hard to um, travel across the map because it's got an impassable thing of lava. I think this is just like a giant chasm, like if there was a big earthquake and it split the earth. Rampant undeath and curse of the undeath makes me feel like there's just a lot of undead units, and it's like gonna spawn undead units maybe when units die. I don't know what respite means, but probably no healing. That little thing there indicates to me that there's no healing. But yeah, it seems like this is going to be very replayable and interesting as a result of that. I feel like the way the points worked in Empire mode made it so that you just kind of could buy tier 4 units on turn 5 or 10 if you focused really, really hard on the quests to get the points that you needed to get the units. So that was definitely a lot less interesting to me. I think we're coming up on the part where they show off how things that you get are a little bit more cosmetic. Um, I know that's actually pretty far down here, but not all of it is cosmetic. Some of it is going to make it so that you get more things that you can add to your realms. So it's much more replayable. And I like that as an idea as a reward, giving you more toys to play with instead of, um, you know, just like a slightly different skin or something to play around with. This actually feels like there's options between the cosmetics and the functionality changes. So we're going to get 3 types of general realms to choose from: the story realms, which I believe there may be 5 that they've talked about, that are specifically going to talk about the return of the Gadir. And I have to imagine if we're getting 5 of those, that there's going to be a lot more planned in DLCs, probably like 2 or 3 or 4 of those special realms to really tell the story of each DLC. And then we have these challenge realms, which are going to give you just like something unique and different, just so you got something else for replaying. Custom realms are just going to be like things where you pick whatever you feel like to, see what you can come up with, and then you can share that with your friends and have them try and survive on, like, I don't know, some world with a bunch of undead, or maybe a planet where you can't colonize anything, which has always been an interesting setting that you can toggle on and off in previous Age of Wonders games. Um, it looks like there's going to be four types of things that you can trade in and out. There are these geography traits, then there's climate traits, inhabitant traits, presence traits, and miscellaneous traits. Miscellaneous are just like things that can fit into um, any of the other slots. Each realm can have one of the five types having a total of four. So the miscellaneous is just kind of like, well, you could have four miscellaneous, or maybe three miscellaneous and presence, or three miscellaneous and a climate, or maybe there's no miscellaneous and you just got a geography, climate, inhabitant, and presence trait. I have to imagine at the beginning of the game, there's less miscellaneous and more like weird miscellaneous things that you can throw in there. Maybe something that puts penguins all over their planet, or something strange like that. Um, Geography trait is things like, continents and islands. There's also other things in here like the lava divide that I mentioned, and I think that other thing we saw earlier, the scar divide, must be similar. It sounds similar in the name. This is saying that there are two massive land masses separated by an impassable ocean of lava. Um, and that makes me imagine kind of just like taking the water out of the map and saying, okay, there's lava here. You can't build water units. You can't have amphibious units. Everything that travels across that has got to be flying, or you use the underground. I think there is some mention in the text here about how you can use the underground to connect the two land masses. Only connected through the underground. Yeah, so that's how your land units would get around if like you can't get in the air. Lava Lakes sounds interesting. I don't know how Lava Lakes pairs with Lava Divide, but that's definitely something I want to play around with. If I'm gonna like play like a fire mage, I might want to go to a fire planet and just like see how that how that jives, if that actually works well, or if it's just kind of like a fun theme to kind of combine or play into. Climate traits are pretty typical. You can have desert realms, endless fields, forming realm, and for example, the desert realms is just like turning up deserts on in previous games and turning down all the other uh, terrain or climate types that you might see out there in the world. And yeah, I think that it can be a lot more interesting than that, because I think a forming realm is things where the world is just going to be forming around you, and it's kind of like, well, it's going to be hard to make too much of a plan. You're going to have to adapt a lot with the forming realms, which is a strategy I've always enjoyed. I don't like coming into a match with too much of a plan, because sometimes the map has its own ideas and you got to adapt to them. So getting good at that and planning for that, I think, makes a lot of sense. Endless fields would just be like, probably a lot of temperate climates and places where it's easy to grow food and get pops and other things like that. That's what I imagine with that one. Inhabitant traits are things like, okay, this planet is going to have a bunch of animals, or it's going to have like maybe very little hostile enemies and more like friendly NPC faction type units. We haven't seen much about the NPC factions, I think, or anything at all yet, but I have to imagine they're back in this game. I've seen things like a core tenet of Age of Wonders games, having those things you can negotiate, but not negotiate with, but not necessarily play as. Um, but there's more than that. There's things like you could probably just have a lot of like thief units or mercenary units on the map. I believe in previous ones you could buy mercenaries at mercenary camps, so there's probably some kind of inhabitant trait that has to do with that. And this next one is probably my favorite of all the traits. The presence trait allows you to get some pretty interesting things with the like diplomacy between the different factions, and that was actually something that you did see in Age of Wonders Planetfall. I really liked the way that was implemented, having like a bunch of syndicate fighting Kirko, or like the um, something planets, the Elop, I think they were called, fighting against the people who aren't in there, a giant federation of people. Um, because it just kind of felt like you're actually in a universe that has history and a future, and it made it easier for me to just kind of like experience the game from an RPG perspective versus just, oh, I'm gonna play and get the big numbers and win, like, which is fun, but after a certain point you just want to tell a story. And then miscellaneous traits, they give us a few things that you could throw in there for miscellaneous traits like a ruined realm where there are free cities don't happen very often, but there's a lot of loot and stuff that you can get, and they're marked by ruins that kind of look like the free cities. You could have like a small underground so that it's not just as sprawling as your other map. I really love that idea because I found like having two maps to navigate your units on could be a little bit of a headache and kind of confusing at times. So just having a small version of that makes a lot of sense to me. I think, yes, the next one was another one that I was pretty excited about. I really like the sound of having mega cities. I know some people will not like having the ability to settle cities because just, like having a wider empire is generally better in these types of games. Although I predict that tall empires should be viable, or may be viable in this next one based off of, the way the vassal mechanic works and the emphasis it looks like they have on not necessarily being the bad invader and having like a champion or mortal champion. It indicates to me that maybe you can play tall and play the nice guy and still have a viable army. There's an underground start. I don't know if that just means you start underground, if all of the factions start underground, and then maybe the overlay or the normal surface map is just underdeveloped. I don't know. It sounds interesting. Maybe something they're still playing around with in development, and that's why we don't have more information on here. Unlimited power sounds interesting. I guess that might mean there's no casting points. You can just spend whatever mana you have. That sounds great to me. I always run out of casting points, both in like the tactical layer and the strategic layer. So if that's what that means, that's pretty awesome. Maybe it means you have unlimited mana and the only limitation is your casting points. I could see both of those being what that is getting at. So I think we're getting towards the end. We have our Pantheon, which is where you choose your leaders and you collect experience to get nice things like cosmetics. They mentioned this Necromancer banner icon, as well as I think like this helmet and this set of armor as being things you unlock through playing in the Pantheon. But you also get things like presence traits to make the realm more interesting and replayable. I think this is one here. Yeah, if you get to if you get to Pantheon level 4, you can choose Frozen Realm, which I think is it looks like the hat is 1, that's 2, that's 3, and maybe one of these ones around here is the Frozen Realm one. I can't really tell which icon is going with it. But yeah, this seems to be the same Pantheon tree where we have like some undead looking icons as well as like some armor icons on the right. And I think this is just, everybody gets access to the same little path here. I'm not sure what's off on the left. Is that the Frozen Realm actually? That is the Frozen Realm, isn't it? It requires level 4, and then you have to spend some points to unlock it here on the left. Okay, yeah, this is starting to make more sense to me now that I'm looking at it a little bit more. And yeah, that's everything we got for this week. Next week, we're going to be getting some information about faction creation. Looking forward to it. Until next time, have a good one.